All right, we are live again. Good evening, everyone. And we apologize for that technical error just now. We had some issues with our backend, and it went live on YouTube, but it did not go live on Facebook. So now that we've fixed the issues, we are back live, and here we have Han. Hi. Sorry for
Hi,
that.
no worries. Happens.
Let's. It happens, right? It happens. Technical issues. Anyway, so welcome everyone to another episode of the Ringer Plus Show live, and we have our usual Thursday evening sessions called Ask the Expert Anything. And for this episode, we have Han Liu, co-founder director of Ringgit Plus, who might I say, also has been dabbling in crypto for the last few months for research purposes, of course. And I think he's the best person to kind of talk to us about some pretty big news that has been happening that was announced on Friday. Some kind of got a lot of attention around the world, which is our Securities Commission actually taking action against Binance, which is the world's largest digital assets exchange, for operating illegally in Malaysia, and has requested that they have not requested, it demanded that Binance cease operations in Malaysia, and has actually encouraged all Malaysian users to to withdraw their holdings and basically to stop using Binance altogether, right? Han, I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm just going to take a look. We're just going to take a look at the. Okay, we're going to take a look at the slide. The announcement itself. So, the wording of this statement is pretty harsh, right? Like, it's pretty clear what the SE is talking about. After all, as they mentioned as well, Binance has been on the Securities Commission investor alert list for the last 12 months. And so they have demanded that in the next 14 days, the SE has it told Binance that they must cease operations in Malaysia. The Binance website, the mobile application, must also stop operating in the country. Immediately cease all media and marketing activities, including circulating, publishing, or sending any advertisements and or other marketing material, whether via emails or otherwise, to Malaysian investors, and immediately restrict Malaysian investors from accessing Binance's Telegram group. So as of now, 14 business days from 26 July, we are actually about the halfway point from the cutoff date. We've still not heard anything from Binance, actually, and everything seems to be operating as usual. So Han, I think maybe at this point you can share with us, like, what do you think about this whole situation before we go into the next parts?
Yeah, no, thanks, Pang. I think, look, like Binance is, as you mentioned, one of the largest cryptocurrency or digital asset exchanges in the world, right? So it's no surprise that a significant number of Malaysians actually use it. They have been on the alert list for the SE. What that means is that they wanted to alert investors that Binance is not registered here as a digital asset exchange in Malaysia, and therefore should not be operating that business in Malaysia until such time that they get regulated to do so. It's been on the alert list, like you said, for a year, right? And I think I don't want to say the word lost their patience, but I think given the significant amount of activity of Malaysians using Binance for whatever purposes, whether it's exchanging or other financial products, the SE has decided to come down fairly hard to say, look, this is actually against the law of the land here in Malaysia. And I think that's well within their rights to do so. Their job is to regulate the industry, and then and their main job is to protect us as investors, right? So they're just doing their job, right?
Correct, and like you said, I think with Binance, like this is not the first time that they've come into trouble in terms of regulations. We've seen Binance getting all kinds of attention with regulators around the world, and with Malaysia, it's just like the latest country to have announced some form of investigations or regulatory action against Binance, right? So in that sense, it's actually quite difficult, right? Like as a global exchange. there's no mention so far. I think a lot of us actually don't have the numbers as well as to how many Malaysians are actually using Binance. But from this notice, it does seem like it seems to be a big enough number for SE to be taking this kind of action, right?
Yeah, I think everyone says, "Hey, look, you can't run a business illegally." Realistically, it's really how much impact does it have on a specific a group of Malaysians, right? If it's a large group, then it does make sense pragmatically to take action such as this one, right? So, my opinion is 2 weeks, or rather 14 business days, not quite 2 weeks, is a little short, but I guess it is what it is. If liquidity is good enough, which on Binance it is. That in theory should not be a huge issue, right? To take that much, to take action that quickly.
Right.
But for me, I'm interested to kind of keep an eye on this and see what happens next. I have been watching the crypto space for quite a while. If not for my own investment, but for mainly for just to make sure that we keep abreast of investing trends. As a certified financial planner, that is a quite important thing to do, right? To make sure you're well clued up on the various investment trends and new asset classes such as this one.
Correct. Okay, so let's talk about what kind of potential impacts will there be for Malaysian users, right? At this point, again, there's not a lot of messaging coming from Binance itself. So I think, like you've mentioned here, there's going to be like maybe a few scenarios that might happen, right? So maybe you want to share that as well.
Yeah, sure. I think like the key thing to think about first is whether Binance is actually going to take any action, whether CZ himself is going to respond, or Binance as an entity will take any specific action on this and liquidate everybody who lives in Malaysia. I personally think that's highly unlikely to happen. What's more likely to happen is if Binance as a corporation or as an entity does not comply with the demand or statement from the SC, then the SC is well within its rights to, and I fully expect it to, take action with the powers that it does have. So, for example, if they say, "Hey, look, you're not supposed to be offering these services, therefore you are contravening local laws," and if you offer your services through the internet, then MCMC comes into play, and I can use the powers I have to enforce that action onto you. So, for example, in number one, on or after the 16th of August, which is 14 business days after July 26th, if you count Awal Muharram as a public holiday. Our local ISPs or local internet providers may decide to block Binance.com, the apps, from being able to be accessed by a Malaysian IP address. So that's kind of something to watch out for. So you might not be able to access it from a Malaysian IP. You will just have no access to the website. So that's what might happen. Right. Another thing that might happen is that again, several methods of logging in and transferring, exchanging funds in Binance. One of the ways to authorize that is through SMS OTP. Most of us are familiar with what that means. So you need an OTP to make a transaction. Sometimes you need an OTP to log in. Binance sends the OTP to Malaysian phone numbers through an SMS shortcode. That may be the shortcode itself might be okay, but like sending through that shortcode to Malaysian phone numbers might be an issue, right? So for me, I fully expect if Binance as an entity does not take any specific action as per the SC's requests, these two things at least to happen.
Right. So
subsequently, not on the day itself, but subsequently for sure.
Right. So in that sense, like it's going to be extremely difficult for anyone for who uses Binance to be able to perform either logging in or performing any transactions due to that. If you have that SMS OTP enabled, and I think they do request some form of two-factor authentication, and SMS OTPs is one of them, right?
That's exactly right.
So now I think this is where we come to like the big meat of the session, right? Like a lot of people are for many people, this is going to be the first time where they're going to face such an issue. If I'm a Binance investor or user right now, what options do I have? So Han, this one, I think this is all down to you. Like, you can help explain what these pointers are.
Yeah, sure, sure. I think, look, one of the things that you should be aware of, or what you can do, given the announcements made, right? If what the SC has announced has made you highly concerned with Binance as an entity, as a going concern in Malaysia, then one thing you can do is to do one or two of the following, right? The first is you may have to liquidate your i.e. sell your tokens or sell your holdings on the exchange, get it off the ramp back to ringgit or back to another currency which you have on Binance. That's one thing you might want to do. You might want to transfer your tokens to another exchange which is not outright banned in Malaysia, nor on the investor alert list, because that one will then be banned subsequently if they don't comply with the request to regulate themselves here in Malaysia, right? You might want to consider thinking, hey, look, like there are actual regulated exchanges for digital assets and cryptocurrencies here in Malaysia. You might want to transfer the tokens that you have bought previously. If you don't want to sell them, you want to maintain your exposure to cryptocurrencies, to then send it from Binance or to your local cryptocurrency exchange wallet. Just make sure you do it on the native chain and not on Binance's lots and lots of different chains that they support. Make sure you choose the native chain. You can also consider, hey, if you're not operating on Binance to trade and you're just looking to buy and hold coins, buy and hold cryptocurrencies, you might want to consider doing it in your own wallet. There are many kinds of wallets available. So there's the hardware kind, as well as software wallets such as Trust Wallet, MetaMask, etc. So there's all kinds of things you could do. The last thing you could consider doing, and clearly most of Malaysian users of Binance have been doing, which is do nothing, despite Binance being on the investor alert list for the past year. But given what I talked about earlier around restrictions onto accessing not just the site or the apps, but accessing the capability to make transactions, that might be something that you will find risky if you just do nothing. You got to do something to protect the investments you've made.
Right. So in that sense, like, maybe you want to share as well, surely there's going to be some people who will plan to do nothing and think that, over time, we have some people will have that holdings inside and don't intend to perform anything, maybe out of choice, and maybe out of the fact that we know that a lot of crypto investors entered the scene earlier this year around the time when the previous bull run, and they might be at a loss, right? So a lot of these people might be hesitant to actually liquidate their holdings. So at least now there are actually some options. But maybe you want to share a little bit more about what happens, for example, if worst case scenario, right? Someone does nothing. To the worst combination, right? Someone does nothing, and Binance actually starts complying with the SEC's request.
Yep. No, that's a good point. I think personally, look, Binance is a global cryptocurrency exchange. They transact 30 to 80 billion dollars of cryptocurrencies per day. Your funds are likely to be safe as it is. Safe in that they're not going to disappear. They might go up and down in value as per the market movements, but they're not going to be just lost, right? So it's a very big organization with lots and lots of controls around that kind of thing. However, what might be at risk is your own personal access to those funds. So those funds will be there, but your personal access to those funds might be at risk, right? Because of those things which I said earlier. You might not even be able to log in.
Right.
You might not be able, if you are able to log in, you might not be able to transfer stuff out because mobile phone transfers might be disrupted, right? You might not get an OTP to transfer things out. So your funds will be there, but your access to them is at risk. So that's something that I want to just caution everyone to take this quite seriously, right? And you need not sell or your liquidate and sell, and if you're a big believer in long-term holding for investment assets and you don't want to sell, and you just perhaps bought at the wrong time, even though that is a debated point, what's the right or wrong time. You can transfer your assets over, right? The nature of cryptocurrencies is that they sit in wallets, which and they are eminently and almost instantly transferable between wallets. So you can transfer it from your Binance wallet into your Luno wallet for the supported coins. You can transfer it to your own wallet, the ones I said earlier, either a hardware or a software wallet, and keep them there, because if that's your intention, right? But if it's to trade, then perhaps you might want to reconsider, given the lack of access you might encounter.
Right. Yeah. So that actually is a pretty comprehensive perspective, right? So maybe one thing I want to touch as well, the fact that Binance is an unregulated, it's unregulated in Malaysia, and we know that Binance has been working with a lot of bodies across the world as well, and as such has created, different versions or variations of its own services, such as Binance.us and even Binance in Singapore, right, which is a slightly different, with much considerably less options for investors compared to the Binance.com offerings. So maybe in this case as well, like before we go into the next slide, I want to ask you, Han, like what regulatory risks are there for an investor? Like why does the SC always say, like, look, go with a regulated exchange, because I know we always talk about this, but like the SC's motto is always about like keeping the interest of the investor at the forefront, right? So maybe you want to share a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, sure. I think look, like there's a reason why unlicensed, unregulated operators are not allowed to operate here in Malaysia for for a couple of key reasons. One, you want to avoid specific bad actors that I don't regulate as a regulator. Let's say if I was a regulator, if I don't regulate this person, it could be a really bad actor out there, scamming people, taking people's money and not giving what was promised, etc. But there's no way to regulate. There could be also very large cryptocurrency exchanges which should be regulated, which are not, perhaps because they have not gone to the stage of being regulated here. Nothing eminently wrong with that on the business side with using the exchange, but just they haven't gone through the process of getting themselves registered here, regulated here, licensed to operate whatever they want to operate here, right? So for me, we have to differentiate between what are good actors and bad actors, and what are registered and unregistered persons. So that's the first thing, right? And the SC's job is to make sure that everybody who offers capital markets services to Malaysians is registered and licensed here to do what they say they're going to do, right? And part of the reason why it's important to make sure people are, or entities are regulated, is if something goes wrong, and not because you've timed the market wrongly, or you invested at the wrong time, or you lost money because the market moved. That those are just investment risks. If something goes wrong from a position of fraud, or human error, or process failure, or whatever reason, there is then some recourse for a Malaysian investor to ask someone like the SC, which has all kinds of departments within there, including one under them called the SIDREC, the Securities Industry Dispute Resolution Center, where you can go and say, hey, look, there's an exchange regulated in Malaysia who's did me wrong. They lost my coins, or whatever reason there may be, and there will be a process in which place you may be you have that dispute resolved. You might get compensated, etc., etc. That's the whole point of regulation, right? If something goes wrong, there's someone there. I don't say big brother, someone there to look after your interests, right? As an investor, right? And that's what you want, right? You want someone there to look after you if something goes wrong. If not the entity itself, that's essentially the function of regulation.
Right. Actually, that's pretty cool, right? Like, I don't think a lot of people would know the existence of something like SIDREC. Cool. That's that's great information. Let's go to the next slide. So then again, like we come to that whole question, right? Like cryptocurrencies are seen by a lot of people, a lot of bodies, that it is a wild west right now, right? Like not many people, some people are saying that it's not an investment asset class, simply because it is not backed by anything. It is purely a digital asset. What's your view on this, right? I know that you've done some sessions with the Ringgit Plus Academy, and you've shared some pretty interesting stuff. Sorry. And maybe you want to share it with the viewers here.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think. Yeah, I think as a financial planner, we have to assess any new asset class that comes to market on its merits, right? Rather than just, what are people saying? You got to look at it, really understand what drives each asset class, right? Look, like with cryptocurrency, it's a 13-year-old, maybe 12 and a half year old asset class. So as with any new asset class in the world of asset classes, right? There's some growing pains and maturity that needs to happen, right? So you have to, the same thing happened with stock investing in the 1700s, with bond and investing in the late 1700s and early 1800s. The same with derivatives in the late 70s, 1970s, and 1980s, right? Brand new asset classes need to mature. What I mean by mature is not just in the asset class itself. I mean also in the investor's viewpoint of the asset class, right? So, do I understand enough about it? What drives the value? What doesn't drive the value, etc. And also understanding of who are the bad actors in an asset class. So who's pumping and dumping stocks? Who's trying to sell me a stock that's in the 1600s, which of a fictional country that actually existed as a fictional country that this person created and sold stock of a company in the fictional country, right? So that these things happens. Bad actors exist, right, in all asset classes, right? So cryptocurrencies as an asset class needs to mature also. I think there'll be some growing pains with investor education, as well as weeding out these kind of bad actors and gaining more understanding about who's a bad actor and who's not. But fundamentally, I believe there is some utility value within cryptocurrency as an asset class. Why do I say that? Because you can immediately see a couple of important uses of cryptocurrencies today, right? One, store of value. If there's millions of computers verifying that I have a balance of a coin, that's good enough for somebody else to prove that I can pass it to that person, right? So that's kind of store of value is very important, right? And there's value in store of value, for example, right? There's utility value of store of value. Additionally, because it's a highly digital and highly internet-driven utility, right? You can transfer it fairly quickly. Most cryptocurrencies within a few minutes, and most kind of 10 to 15 minutes. And transferring money globally has value, right? You're thinking people like Western Union, TransferWise, they have value because they're able to help money transferred almost instantly from one person to another worldwide. So for me, it's not just about speculation that obviously drives a lot of the value in cryptocurrencies, as with any asset class, right? But there's also fundamental values that you need to understand before you invest in a cryptocurrency. So that's my view.
Right. So I think also what the slide is saying there, and I know you've been sharing this with us offline as well. That a lot of times understanding and risk appetites it's very important when it comes to asset allocation, and a lot of times, especially with the younger group of investors, this is something that not many people will
Yeah. I think because it's new, sorry, I should finish, right? Because it's new, growing asset class, you're still learning about it, right? If you want to consider it part of your portfolio, look at the risk return characteristics. That's good. But just keep in mind not to put it as too big a portion of your portfolio, at most 10% of your liquid portfolio, ideally, right? While this asset class matures, you mature along with it.
Right. So then it kind of, again, it comes down to like your individual risk appetite and your long-term financial investment strategies, right? Right. Cool. So in that sense, sorry, before we go on to the we're actually almost the end. Before we go to the Q&A session, I think it's best to close this up as well for people who are interested to invest in cryptocurrencies and may not really are interested but not really 100% sure about like what are the risks involved and how it fits into your individual portfolio. This is where actually a professional certified financial planner may help, who can then analyze your individual risk appetite, and from there build a portfolio for that makes sense for you, right? So we've come to the end of this session, but we are going to do our Q&A session. And we've got quite a number of questions, so I'm just going to go straight into this. So Han, I'm just going to ask you the questions, and you can just give us what your best answers, right? So first question, what's the risk of my leaving my investments in Binance after the SC ban, right? I think we've covered this before, but maybe just a quick reminder.
Yep. Yeah, a quick reminder, your funds will probably be okay, right? Like the Binance is a multi-billion-dollar company. It trades tens of billions of US dollars worth of digital assets daily. right? Your fund itself should be fine. The risk is the access to your funds, which may be restricted from Malaysia. So that's just something to watch out for, which means you can't actually access your funds easily. You can't actually trade easily because you've lost access to the exchange from a Malaysian point of view, right? So that's just something to watch out for. The funds itself, fine. Access to those funds might be at risk.
Yeah, that's a scary thing to think about. It's like it reminds me of people who own Bitcoin wallets in the past and then forgetting their passphrases, right?
Yeah. Or closer to home, it's a bit like, online banking goes down. Your funds should be still in the bank, but you now have to go somewhere outside of your home
Yeah.
to go get it, right?
It's a similar concept, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Let's go to the next question. So most of my investments in Binance are in locked staking. It's one of the products offered by Binance. Is it safe to withdraw them?
Okay, good question. Lock staking is a fairly new feature within the Binance ecosystem. It's basically kind of like a vault or FD version of Binance, where you get staking rewards. Means you hold your coins in there for a while, and they give you rewards for keeping it with them. So the time that you give up, you get some rewards back in terms of percentages of what you put in. But just like an FD, you can break it, right? You can break it. You will lose maybe a couple of days of interest, maybe more, depending on the timing which you break it.
Staking, right?
Yeah, but it's perfectly safe to stop to unstake it. If you're in Binance lock staking, unstake it. Take the hit. It's okay. And then decide to withdraw. It's fine.
Right. So in that sense, also your capital or whatever investments that you've done in that lock staking product is retained. You just don't earn the rewards because you didn't fulfill the requirement, which is to stake it for X period of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay. The next question. I think this one, definitely a lot of people are going to ask this one, and we know this is quite a common question. Can we still use VPN to access our account? I'm afraid to lose all my money in Binance.
Really good question. I think, look, we cannot be ignorant of the various solutions that are out there for people who don't feel that we should be locked by a specific geography's rules, right? So some people have used VPNs to access things where they're not supposed to. Some people have gone to China, for example, use the VPN to access things that are not allowed to be accessed in China, etc. In Malaysia, use VPNs to access things from overseas markets. Sometimes it's perfectly okay to do that. Sometimes maybe not so okay. For Binance, my guess is that it will be okay initially, and it should be okay initially, but there's a risk, right? There's a risk in that Binance may comply with the SEC's request, and they are able to see if you're using a VPN, right? And if there's a particular point in time where your account was a Malaysian IP and you are using a VPN, they may do something about it. So Binance has a way to see what account you have. For example, if you have got a Malaysian phone number logged into Binance, you're highly likely to going to be a Malaysian resident investor, right? So that's something to watch out for. VPN is something that I get asked a lot, and for me, there is some inherent risk. It's not completely risk-free to do that.
Yep, and I think to add on to what you say as well, like in the sign up process as well, there's a KYC process. Know your customer process, which involves like taking a selfie and I can't remember whether it was an IC number or something like that.
Yeah.
So there is a KYC, there is your phone number, and definitely you also probably mentioned that you're from Malaysia. So again, like you said, Han, Binance can detect and they could actually comply, right?
Yep.
This question from Said Amir. Illegal unsolicited gambling SMS keeps on coming, but Binance is banned. Yeah.
Look, like ultimately, right? One of the reasons why Binance was taken action against is because maybe folks have complained to the SEC saying, "Hey, look, like this is illegal, right? Just take action." So if you get illegal unsolicited gambling solicitation for gambling that you don't feel should be allowed, report it. Just like someone or many people would have reported Binance as operating illegally here. So that's just something to point out. Two wrongs don't make a right. So if you get solicited SMSs to do illegal things, please report it to the relevant authorities.
Yep. Okay, next question. Sorry if I missed it. From Alex. What about Trust Wallet? It's owned by Binance, so is there a chance that we might get blocked for using it?
A really good question, honestly. For me, within the SEC's notice, right, Trust Wallet is not specified. right? So quite likely, as it is just a piece of software, it should be fine. However, if there's any kind of IP identifiers within Trust Wallet and the Binance team have control over how that wallet operates, they might do that same thing, which I said, look, they might comply, and then you might start running the same problem. So for me, there's a lot of mites here, but it's because I don't run Binance, and I don't run Binance, and I'm not in the SC. But this is what I predict might happen.
Right. Yeah, that's a pretty good point. What is the reason that the SC did not approve Binance? I don't think it's
Good.
approval, right?
Yeah, good question. I think the short answer is Binance hasn't applied to operate a asset exchange here in Malaysia, nor a futures exchange for Binance futures. So if you don't apply, you don't get approved. Nice and simple, right? Now, like if you don't apply but try to operate anyway, then you are in contravention of the securities laws here in Malaysia, right? We have a law called the Capital Markets and Services Act 2007. You can check it out. And digital assets since the last couple of years has been added to those laws.
In Malaysia, we have there are 4 regulated ones, right? Licensed by the SC.
There are 4 regulated exchanges here which you can trade on.
Yeah, so I think that answers that question. Hisham is asking, so does that mean we can't trade in Binance anymore?
Really good question. I think, look, like if you ask me, honestly, you should be fine on the 16th itself, right? However, I can't predict whether it's the day after the 16th, the week after, the month after, or the year after the 16th of August, where you may be finding it difficult to not just trade, but to deposit and withdraw money into Binance from a Malaysian IP address or Malaysian domain, right, or Malaysian domicile. So that's just something to watch out for. Once you have money there, you should be able to trade, unless then Binance decides to comply, which they might, right? And it's impossible for me or you or anyone to predict when they might decide to comply with the Malaysian with the Securities Commission's request.
Right. So I think this follows up really nicely with the next question, which is, will Binance just ignore the SC? That's dangerous.
Really good question. Again, I believe, and this is just my belief, that again on the 16th itself, they're unlikely to take that quick action. However, I can't predict whether it will be the day after, the month after, or the year after, where they decide, hey, look, I want to run a legitimate business here in Malaysia. I'll set up a little office here in Malaysia. I'll have Binance.com.my. Eventually, someday, I'll have to talk to the SE first, get registered, get licensed, get approved, then I'll do it. But in order to get registered, licensed, and approved, you then have to stop doing the illegal thing that you were doing. So there's a chance that they will not just ignore the SC, because they may want to run a business here because they realize lots of Malaysians want to use us. We should probably set up a business here.
Right. Actually, on that note as well, right? Like we just ran a story earlier this evening about the fact that Binance appears to be actively hiring for a Malaysian country manager, right? So I mean, it sounds like they are doing something about this, and maybe down the line,
Yep, absolutely. So again, like if you look at what Binance has done, they've put up a job ad for a country head, plus some other stuff. So they're clearly serious about operating in Malaysia in the long term. So I can't say that they will not comply forever. I think that will likely happen. But what I can say is probably going to be not going to be on the 16th, right? That's not going to happen on the 16th. So just beware. Any day after the 16th, Binance could decide, hey, we want a legitimate business in Malaysia. But to be able to apply to become a legitimate business, I may have to comply with what the SC says first, right? And that could happen any day after the 16th of August.
And the whole process of regulations could also take some time as well, isn't it?
Yep. It could take time, right? Could take weeks, could take months, could take longer.
Right. Cool. Okay. So let's go on to the next question. What about all my coins in Binance? So there's a few options, right? We shared that just now.
Yeah. I think 2 things to say. One, your coins should be perfectly safe. What I mean by that is, they will still be subject to the market movement. But in terms of Binance, like just turning off your coins and confiscating your coins, that's highly unlikely to happen. They are a highly developed company. They transact tens of billions of US dollars worth of coins a day. They're unlikely to just take your coins and go away. But the risk is your own personal access to those coins might be restricted in some shape or form through that OTP restriction, through the ISP restriction, internet restriction, essentially. So just keep that in mind. The coin itself should be safe. but your access might be at risk.
Always the problem, right? Okay, cool. Blake is asking now, if I do P2P deposits and withdrawals, and if you trade in Binance, you don't need an OTP. Does that mean that if I don't log out, I can still trade freely?
Okay, that's a very good question. Two things. One, look, we can't predict what Binance is going to do when if they decide to comply with what the SE has instructed them to. And I'm not going to say they're never going to comply. They might do it, and they might do it on the 17th because they might have hired their country manager tomorrow, for example, right? What I can say is if you're hoping to be never logged out from your account, that's a very big hope. I think most of us have experienced being logged out from some account somewhere at any point in time. So I would not put that as a big hope to be never logged out of your account. You might be logged out for whatever reason. The service provider might log you out. The ISP might force you to be logged out. Your browser CAC might log you out. So for me, I wouldn't put all hope on not being logged out.
It's always a risk. Okay, now Brandon's sharing a suggestion. We can temporarily disable SMS authentication from the settings of Binance. So if we just use email and Google authentication for the time being, is that possible? And then can we then continue using Binance?
Again, really good question. I think similar to the VPN question, right? Which is let's put it straight here, right? Binance knows whether you're Malaysian or not sitting in Malaysia. Binance themselves knows, right? So while there may be enforcement towards your ISP, i.e. your internet provider, to stop you from accessing the site, and therefore you will have to use a VPN, or a mobile network stops, so the SMS being stopped or being sent to you for OTP. Therefore, you use Google Authenticator, which is also encouraged. You should use it anyway, SMS or not. But if Binance themselves decides to comply with SE, and I'm seeing reasons why there's a risk that they might decide to comply because they're looking to operate here legitimately, then Binance themselves might decide, hey, look, like you're Malaysian, and I'm trying to get on the SE's good books, right, and comply with what they want, and therefore I can't let you trade until I get the license. So then you might be stopped from even doing that, right? So that's just a risk there.
Yeah, cool. Okay, I think we're on the last question. Should we even invest in crypto? I mean, there's a lot of FUDs, right? Fear, uncertainty, and distrust, right? Should we? I mean, you shared that in your slide just now, but maybe just a recap.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as a financial planner, and I recommend everyone to get one, all right, to really help guide you to understanding every single asset class that's out there, right? It's a bit like saying, should we even invest in stocks or commodities or bonds or property, right? You've got to assess every single asset class on its merits. What I mean by merits, how viable is it as an asset class? What does it even do, right? What's the fair value of said asset class based on that value? And regardless of whether you invest or not, if you were investing, always take a long-term view, right? If you take a long-term view, stay diversified, have a little bit in crypto. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying you should do that or shouldn't, but if you did, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And if you're not, also absolutely nothing wrong with that. The key is to invest in what you know and what you understand.
Right. And if all of that sounds too complicated, sorry, probably just have to mention this as well. If all of that sounds too complicated, then maybe engaging with a professional, such as a certified financial planner, will be, very helpful in terms of building your investment portfolio, right? I think at the end of the day, everyone needs to invest for the long run, and therefore, having some assistance is definitely going to be helpful. So, we have Ringgit Plus Advance, and you can actually kind of speak to people like Han to be able to help build your investment portfolio, tax optimization, retirement planning, and a whole lot more, right? So to find out more, maybe you just want to check out Ringgit Plus Advance. But I think that is the end of this session. I know that there are some more questions that are coming across. We're very sorry, but we want to keep within our specified time frame and don't really want to bore you with all these conversations. But if you do still have questions, please leave them on our comment section. We might address them at a later time Binance still hasn't mentioned anything. But by that time, they might already be answered, right? But do share them across. We have a Ringer Plus blog where you can share your questions, and Han does visit the blog regularly, and he does reply to some of those questions. So with all that said, I think we've come to the end of our session this evening. We will have another session next week. So thank you, Han, for joining this session. I'll catch you maybe next week. It could be someone else. I don't know. We'll decide next in the next meeting, right?
Yeah, thanks, Fang.
All right, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching us, catching this episode this evening. And I'll catch you guys in the next episode. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone.